Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. People think that marriage falls apart suddenly, like a house collapsing overnight. But it doesn't. It crumbles slowly, piece by piece, so gradually that you don't even notice it's happening. Until one day, you look around and realize you're standing in the wreckage. That was me. I had always thought Rachel and I had a solid marriage. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but I thought that was normal. What wasn't normal was the way she had started treating me lately. It wasn't just the nagging or the small criticisms. That stuff had been there for years. It was the way she talked to me, the way she looked at me, like I was a disappointment she had to put up with. The worst part? It didn't just happen in private. One night, at a family gathering, I was standing by the grill, talking with my brother and a couple of our friends. We were laughing, trading stories, just having a good time. Rachel was inside, helping set the table with my mom and sister. Then she called out from the patio door, "Mike, can you try not to burn the steaks this time?" Laughter. I forced a smile, brushing it off. My brother smirked. "She's got faith in you, huh?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "Yeah, something like that." I thought that would be the end of it, but Rachel wasn't done. She stepped outside, hands on her hips. "Seriously, guys, you don't know what I deal with. You think it's bad watching him with a grill? Try living with him. The guy can barely change a light bulb without making a mess." The group erupted into laughter. I clenched my jaw, heat crawling on my neck. It wasn't just a joke. It was how easily it rolled off her tongue, how natural it was for her to humiliate me in front of other people. My sister shot me a look, but I just shrugged. I learned a long time ago that calling Rachel out in public only made things worse. The rest of the night, I went through the motions, smiling, talking, pretending everything was fine. But something had shifted inside me. On the drive home, Rachel was in a great mood, chatting about how nice the evening was, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my chest. I gripped the wheel tighter. How long had I been letting this happen? How many times had I laughed it off, telling myself it didn't matter? The answer hit me like a punch to the gut. Too many. And I wasn't sure how much more I could take. The next few weeks passed in a blur, but the feeling inside me didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. Rachel's little comments, the way she talked to me in front of other people, it wasn't just a one-time thing. I started paying closer attention, noticing things I had ignored before. One night, we were out with friends at a local bar, just a casual gathering. I had barely taken a sip of my beer before Rachel started in on me. "Mike's idea of fixing things around the house is calling someone else to do it," she said, laughing as she sipped her wine. "I mean, come on, you're an electrician, babe. You'd think some handyman skills would come with the job." The group chuckled, and I forced a smirk, but my patience was wearing thin. Jason, one of my old friends from high school, gave me a look. "Damn, Rachel, why don't you just take the whole man card from him while you're at it?" Rachel waved him off. "Oh, please, it's just a joke." But was it? Because it didn't feel like one anymore. It wasn't just the insults, it was the ease with which she tore me down. The way she made me out to be some incompetent idiot, while smiling like she was just being playful. I tightened my grip on my glass, forcing myself to stay calm. Later that night, when we got home, she acted like nothing had happened. She kicked off her heels, sighing dramatically as she stretched. "That was fun," she said. "We should go out more often." I shut the door a little harder than necessary. She turned, raising an eyebrow. "What's with you?" I stared at her for a long moment, debating whether to say anything. Then, finally, I exhaled and shook my head. "Nothing." She shrugged and walked into the bedroom. I stood there for a minute, staring at the empty hallway, feeling the anger simmer beneath my skin. It was always nothing. That's what I told myself every time she humiliated me in front of people. Every time she acted like I was the punchline to some joke I didn't know I was part of. But it wasn't nothing, and I was done pretending it was. It started with little things. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that maybe I was being paranoid. But the signs were there, clear as day. I had just been too blind to see them before. Rachel suddenly cared about how she looked all the time. Not just for work or when we went out, but even on days when she was just supposed to be home while the renovation crew worked. I'd leave in the morning, and she'd still be in pajamas, hair messy. But when I came home, she'd be wearing makeup, hair done, fresh perfume lingering in the air. One evening, I casually asked, "Why are you dressing up just to be home in a construction zone?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, please. Just because the house is a mess doesn't mean I have to be." I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't stupid. Then there was the timeline of the kitchen renovation. What was supposed to take 2 weeks had somehow stretched into a month. Every time I asked, Rachel had a new excuse. The cabinets got delayed. The flooring had an issue. They found unexpected wiring problems. I had been an electrician for over a decade. I knew exactly how long these projects took. Something wasn't adding up. Then one Saturday, while cleaning out the garage, I found something that made my stomach turn. A small black box hidden behind some old paint cans. I almost didn't open it, but something told me to. Inside was a men's watch. Expensive. Not mine. I held it in my palm, staring at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. Rachel didn't have a brother. She didn't have close guy friends. So who the hell did this belong to? I heard her footsteps coming from inside the house. Quickly, I shoved the box back where I found it and walked inside, heart racing. She was in the living room, sipping coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. I cleared my throat. "Hey, did you buy me a new watch or something?" She glanced up, brows furrowing. "What?" I forced a casual shrug. "Found one in the garage. Looked brand new." Her face changed for just a split second. A flicker of panic before she forced a laugh. "Oh, that. It was supposed to be a surprise. But since you found it, I guess I'll just give it to you now." She was lying. I knew it. I nodded, pretending to buy it, but inside, something snapped into place. The renovation. The long delays. The sudden change in her appearance. The way she always seemed distracted. The way she dismissed my questions. She was cheating, and I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had proof. Because when I exposed her, I was going to make sure there was no way she could talk her way out of it. I barely slept that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Rachel breathing softly beside me, completely unaware that I knew. That I had seen the cracks in her lies, the gaps in her stories. My mind raced with every possibility. Who, when, how long? The pieces were there, scattered in front of me, and now all I had to do was put them together. The next morning, I got up early and left for work as usual. But instead of heading straight to my first job site, I made a stop at the hardware store. Security cameras weren't exactly my area of expertise, but I knew enough to get what I needed: tiny, discrete cameras, easy to install, with remote access straight to my phone. Rachel had been so focused on the kitchen renovation that she never noticed when I came home with a ladder that night, claiming I needed to check something in the smoke detectors. She didn't ask questions. She barely even looked up from her phone. It was almost too easy. By the time I was done, 3 cameras were set up, one in the hallway, one in the living room, and one in our bedroom. The thought made my stomach churn, but I had to be sure. I wasn't going to accuse her with just gut feelings and suspicions. I wanted undeniable proof. The waiting was the hardest part. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had changed. I went to work, came home, made dinner, went through the motions. But every time Rachel looked at her phone with a small smirk, every time she said she had to run to the store, my blood boiled. Then, finally it happened. Thursday afternoon. I had taken the day off, but Rachel didn't know that. I sat in my truck a few blocks away from the house, watching my phone screen as the live feed played. At first, nothing. Just Rachel walking around, tidying up, making a call. But then a knock at the door. The contractor. I watched as she let him in, smiling in a way she never smiled at me anymore. I watched as they stood close, their voices low, their body language unmistakable. And then, just as I had suspected, they didn't go to the kitchen. They went to our bedroom. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My chest burned, my vision blurred at the edges, but I didn't move. Not yet, because now I had exactly what I needed. And tomorrow, Rachel was going to learn just how big of a mistake she had made. I barely moved the rest of the afternoon. I just sat in my truck, gripping the steering wheel, watching the footage over and over again. Every second of it burned into my mind. Rachel, laughing with him. The contractor, some guy she had brought into my house, into my bedroom, acting like he belonged there. Like I didn't exist. I had thought betrayal would feel like rage, like fire burning through my veins. But this was cold. I wasn't going to storm in and scream. That was what she'd expect. what she could spin to make herself the victim. No, I was going to do this my way. When I finally pulled out of my parking spot, my plan was set. The next morning, I got up like normal, acting like it was just another workday. Rachel barely paid attention, still half asleep when I kissed her forehead one last time. Then I left, but instead of going to work, I headed straight to a nearby cafe, waiting for the moment to come. By noon, I was parked outside the house again, phone in hand, watching the live feed. It didn't take long. Rachel had told me the contractor needed to go over some last-minute changes today. That was her excuse. I watched from my phone as she greeted him at the door, wearing that smile, the one she hadn't given me in years. They spoke briefly before heading straight to the bedroom. Game over. I walked up to the house, unlocked the front door quietly, and stepped inside. The place was silent except for the low hum of the TV in the living room, playing some home renovation show. I walked over, grabbed the remote, and switched the input. The security camera feed popped onto the screen. Live. The camera in our bedroom showed exactly what I had expected. Rachel and the contractor tangled together, completely unaware that their little secret was being broadcasted right in the middle of the house. I took my time. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, popped the cap, and leaned against the counter. Then, with the remote in hand, I turned up the volume. Rachel's voice, his voice, filled the entire house. It took them a few seconds to hear it, a few more to realize what they were hearing. Then, pure chaos. I could hear them scrambling, the frantic rustling of sheets, the thud of feet hitting the floor. And then, Rachel's scream. What the hell? The bedroom door slammed open, and Rachel ran into the living room, completely disheveled, her face drained of all color. The contractor, this sweaty, guilty-looking idiot, stumbled out behind her, trying to yank his pants up. I took a long sip of my beer and smirked. Looks like I need a new contractor. I glanced at Rachel. And a new wife. Rachel's hands were shaking. Mike, I held up a finger, cutting her off. No, you don't get to talk. The contractor, still fumbling with his belt, took a step toward me. Look, man, I turned my glare on him, and he immediately took a step back. Good choice. Rachel's breathing was ragged. Please, Mike, I can explain. I laughed. Actually laughed. Explain? Oh, this I gotta hear. What exactly were you two doing in our bedroom, Rachel? I gestured toward the screen, where the footage was still playing in real time. Rearranging furniture. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I set my beer down, grabbed my phone, and hit another button. Suddenly, the footage switched to the recorded version. The moment she let him in. The way she pulled him into the bedroom. The words she whispered in his ear. Rachel screamed. Turn it off. I crossed my arms. Why? Don't like seeing yourself in action? The contractor, who still hadn't even introduced himself, by the way, ran a hand through his hair, looking anywhere but at me. Man, I should go. I smirked. Yeah, you should. Rachel turned on him, eyes wild. Are you serious? You're just gonna leave? He didn't even hesitate. He bolted for the door. Rachel whirled back to me. Mike, please, we can talk about this. I tilted my head. Talk about what? How you spent the last few months screwing another man in my house. How you lied to my face over and over again. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I made a mistake. I grabbed my beer again, nodding. Yeah, you did. I took another sip, letting the silence stretch between us. Then, calmly, I pulled off my wedding ring and flicked it onto the coffee table. We're done. Rachel let out a broken sob. Mike, I walked toward the front door, but before leaving, I turned back. Oh, by the way, I said, voice casual. Your clothes? They're in the contractor's trash bin out front. Her mouth fell open, horror flashing across her face. I opened the door, stepped outside, and slammed it shut behind me. I drove away without looking back, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My pulse was still pounding, but it wasn't from anger anymore. It was from the sheer relief of being done. I had spent so much time doubting myself, questioning whether I was imagining things, wondering if I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. The proof had been right there on my screen in my own damn house. Rachel had humiliated herself. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to throw punches. I let the truth speak for itself, and watching her world crumble under the weight of her own actions was enough. I pulled into a parking lot a few blocks away and parked, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. I sat there for a long time, staring out the windshield, taking slow, deep breaths. It was over. It was really over. Then my phone started blowing up. Rachel, 10 missed calls. Where are you? Please, Mike, we need to talk. I messed up, but we can fix this. Just come home. I love you. Don't throw this away. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. Throw this away? She had thrown me away the second she invited another man into our bedroom. Then another text came through. Jason, dude, just heard. What the hell happened? News was spreading fast. I hadn't even told anyone yet, but I should have known Rachel would start running damage control. I typed back a simple response. Me, caught her cheating. Kicked her out. Divorce papers incoming. The dots appeared immediately, then stopped, then started again. Finally, his reply came through. Jason, Jesus, you good? I exhaled slowly, thinking about it. Was I good? I should have been furious, devastated, broken. But the truth was, I felt lighter. Me, yeah, best I felt in years. I put my phone down, ignoring Rachel's next round of desperate messages. I wasn't going back. There was nothing she could say that would undo what she had done. After an hour, I drove back home, not to the house, but to my buddy Greg's place. He had a spare room and had already offered me a place to crash if I ever needed it. I never thought I would, but life had a funny way of flipping things upside down. When I walked in, Greg just nodded. Fridge is stocked. Couch is yours if you don't feel like dealing with the guest room yet. I dropped my bag by the door and sighed. Appreciate it. He handed me a beer, then sat across from me. So what's the plan? I smirked, taking a sip. Divorce. Damn right. We clinked bottles, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. The next day, I met with a lawyer. Claire was sharp, no nonsense, and exactly what I needed. She flipped through my paperwork, nodding approvingly at the screenshots I had saved, the security footage, the text messages. This is airtight, she said. She won't get a dime. I leaned back in my chair. Good. Claire tapped her pen against the table. She might try to make this ugly, though. She will play the victim. She might even try to twist the story to make it seem like you pushed her into it. I smirked. That's why I have video proof. Claire smiled. Exactly. I signed a first round of paperwork, a signature bold and confident across the page. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. Rachel had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. That night, I checked my phone again. More missed calls. More texts. Rachel, I don't know what to do without you. I'm sorry. Please, just talk to me. This isn't fair. That last one made me laugh. Not fair. She had wrecked our marriage, lied to my face, and somehow I was the one being unfair. I blocked her number. Greg walked in, saw my expression, and grinned. That bad, huh? I chuckled. Worse. He tossed me another beer. To your freedom. I caught it easily and cracked it open. To never being that idiot again. We drank, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The divorce process began immediately, but Rachel wasn't going down without a fight. She started with the usual tactics, crying, pleading, sending long-winded emails about how we could work through this. I ignored every single one. Then came the anger. One afternoon, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Mike. Rachel's voice came through, sharp and cold. We need to talk. I exhaled, already exhausted. There's nothing to talk about. She scoffed. Oh, there's plenty to talk about. Like why you're trying to take everything from me. I clenched my jaw. I'm not taking anything. The house was mine before you, and I have proof. You don't get to cheat and still expect to live in a place you disrespected. Rachel laughed bitterly. Oh, so that's how this is going to go? You're going to act like I didn't contribute to our life. I smirked, shaking my head. You contributed all right, just not in ways that'll hold up in court. Silence. Then, quieter, more desperate. Mike, come on. You don't have to do this. I leaned against my truck, staring at the horizon. Yeah, Rachel. I do. Then I hung up. Claire, my lawyer, was relentless. When Rachel tried to spin the situation in mediation, claiming she had fallen out of love and that our marriage had been emotionally over long before she cheated. Claire calmly pulled out the security footage, the text messages, the financial records. Rachel's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Clearly, there were issues in the marriage before this incident. We believe a fair division of assets is warranted. Claire smiled, but there was no warmth in it. There's nothing fair about rewarding infidelity. She turned to the judge. We are requesting that my client retain sole ownership of the house and that spousal support be waived entirely. Given the overwhelming proof of marital misconduct, I don't see how Mrs. Adams can argue otherwise. Rachel glared at me from across the table. I could see the desperation creeping in. This wasn't going how she thought it would. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we can negotiate a settlement. Claire cut him off. My client has nothing to negotiate. Either she signs now, or we take this to trial, where I assure you, she will lose even more. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but I knew her well enough to see past them. This wasn't sadness. It was panic. She had lost control of the situation. She turned to me, voice trembling. Mike, please. I met her gaze, calm and steady. Sign the papers, Rachel. A long pause. Then, finally, with a shaking hand, she scribbled her signature. It was over. After the hearing, Jason met me at a bar to celebrate. He slid a beer across the table, shaking his head. So, what's the final score? I chuckled. I keep the house, no spousal support, and she gets exactly what she deserves. Jason smirked. Damn, cold-blooded. I took a sip. I'm done being the nice guy. As the night went on, the weight that had been sitting on my chest for months finally lifted. Rachel was out of my life for good. No more lies, no more humiliation. The morning after the divorce was finalized, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. No tension in my chest. No pressure to prove myself to a woman who had already made up her mind that I wasn't enough. Just quiet. I stretched out in bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything not being my problem anymore sink in. No more Rachel. No more manipulation. No more lies. I was free. Really free. For the first time in forever, I didn't have to answer to anyone. I took my time getting up, moving through my house like it was mine again. No Rachel's scented candles, no pretentious decorations that I had never liked, no framed photos of a marriage that had been a joke. The walls felt lighter, like they weren't closing in on me anymore. In the kitchen, I made coffee, savoring the simple act of drinking it without someone criticizing how I brewed it. I used to hear, Mike, you make it too strong, or maybe we should just get a Keurig since you can't figure out the measurements. Now, it tasted exactly how I liked it. Halfway through my cup, my phone buzzed. Jason, heard Rachel's been asking about you. Guess she thought you'd come crawling back. I chuckled to myself, shaking my head. Not my problem, but hers were just beginning. At first, she must have thought she'd land on her feet. She moved out, got a fancy apartment, and probably told herself she was living her best life. But reality has a funny way of catching up to people. Jason kept feeding me updates, even though I never asked for them. Jason, she tried hitting up Alex. He shut her down. Word is she's struggling to afford that fancy apartment. Guess she didn't think this one through. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She had spent years acting like she was above me, like she was doing me a favor by being my wife. But now she was alone. No husband, no stable finances, and, from what Jason told me, no more of the friends who used to fawn over her. Turns out, when you ruin your own life, people don't line up to feel sorry for you. Meanwhile, I was doing better than ever. I started hitting the gym again. The first few workouts were brutal. Years of stress and neglect had taken a toll. But pushing myself past my limits felt good. I had spent too long feeling like a shell of myself, and every rep, every drop of sweat, was a reminder that I was taking my life back. I picked up new hobbies, things I had put aside because Rachel made them seem childish or pointless. I started hiking again, spent more time with Jason and the guys, even looked into getting my pilot's license, something I'd always dreamed about but never pursued because Rachel thought it was a waste of money. For the first time in years, I felt like me. And then, one night, Jason invited me out to a bar. I almost said no, but then I realized I had no reason not to go. Before, nights out had meant Rachel checking in every 5 minutes, sending passive-aggressive texts about how late I planned on being out. Now, no one was waiting to control me. At the bar, Jason handed me a beer, smirking. "So, how's single life treating you?" I took a sip, exhaling slowly. "Better than I ever thought it would." Jason leaned back, shaking his head. "Man, I gotta say, I've never seen you like this. You actually look happy." I smirked. "That's because I am." A week later, I ran into her at the grocery store. I had just grabbed a six-pack and some steaks when I turned the corner and saw her standing there, staring blankly at a shelf. She looked different. Not bad, just less. Like she had been knocked off the pedestal she had spent years building for herself. She didn't notice me at first. She was too busy staring at the price tags, her brows furrowed. That's when I saw her basket. Gone were the expensive wines and organic name-brand groceries she used to insist on. Instead, it was all generic brand clearance section stuff. The kind of things she used to roll her eyes at when I bought them. Then she turned, and our eyes met. Her breath hitched. "Mike!" I just looked at her. "Rachel." She hesitated, her grip tightening on the basket. You look good." I nodded. "I know." She bit her lip, shifting on her feet. I was hoping we could talk." I exhaled slowly, tilting my head. "About what?" Her eyes searched mine. "Everything." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You want to talk?" "Fine. Let's talk about how you brought another man into our bedroom. Let's talk about how you lied to me for months, humiliated me, and threw away everything we built because you wanted a cheap thrill." She flinched. "Mike," I held up a hand. "No, you don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to play the victim now that you're alone." Her lip trembled. I miss you." I stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I bet you do." Then I walked past her without another word. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel anything. And that was how I knew I had truly moved on. Rachel had always believed she was untouchable. She carried herself like someone who would always land on her feet, who would always have a safety net, no matter how many people she betrayed. But life doesn't work that way. When you burn every bridge, eventually you run out of places to go. I wasn't looking for updates on her, but they came anyway. Jason, mutual acquaintances, even the occasional rumor floating around town. Rachel wasn't doing well. At first, she tried to act like the divorce hadn't rattled her. She posted pictures of her new life, fake smiles, empty captions about fresh starts and new beginnings. But people talk. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. Her new life wasn't nearly as glamorous as she pretended. Jason just ran into Rachel at the gas station. She looked rough, man. Me, not my problem. Jason, guess she's struggling. She moved out of that fancy apartment. Probably couldn't afford it. I wasn't surprised. She had been so used to having my financial stability that she had no idea how to live without it. The high-end lifestyle she once mocked me for not keeping up with had crumbled beneath her. Then came the real blow. Jason, dude, you're not going to believe this. The contractor dumped her. I actually laughed when I read that one. Me, took him long enough. Jason, yep. Where does he got bored? Didn't want to be her next commitment. Of course, he didn't. Guys like him don't stick around. She wasn't special to him. Just a distraction, something exciting until it wasn't anymore. He had been fine fooling around with her when she was married, but once she was single, she wasn't nearly as appealing. And just like that, Rachel had nothing. A few weeks later, I saw her again. It was at a coffee shop. I had stopped in to grab a drink before heading to job site when I spotted her sitting by the window, staring into her cup like the world had drained out of her. I almost walked past, but she looked up at the last second and met my gaze. Her eyes widened slightly. "Mike!" I hesitated for only a moment, then exhaled and walked over. Rachel. Up close, she looked different. Not bad, just tired. Her usual designer outfits were gone, replaced by something simpler. Her makeup, once always perfect, was barely there. For the first time in years, she looked ordinary. She swallowed hard. "How have you been?" I smirked. "Great." She let out a quiet breath. "I heard about the house." I nodded. "Yeah, still mine." She looked away, gripping her cup. "I had to move out of the apartment. It was too expensive." I tilted my head. "Oh, didn't you say you'd be better off without me?" She flinched. Mike, I held up a hand. Don't. I don't need to hear it. She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. I regret everything. I studied her, searching for any sincerity. Maybe she did regret it. But regret doesn't fix what's already broken. I exhaled slowly. You regret losing the life you had. Not me. Tears welled in her eyes. That's not true. I smiled, shaking my head. Yeah, it is. She wiped at her face quickly, like she was trying to hold herself together. I don't know who I am without you. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth. Then I met her gaze one last time. That's not my problem anymore. Then I walked out, leaving her behind. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything. And that was how I knew I had won. A year ago, if you had told me my marriage would implode, that my wife would cheat on me in my own house, and that I'd be starting over from scratch, I would have thought it would destroy me. But it didn't. It set me free. Life after Rachel was better than I ever could have imagined. The house, once filled with tension and deceit, was now mine. A place of peace, not a battlefield. I remodeled it the way I wanted, ripped out the last traces of her pretentious taste, and turned it into a home that actually felt like me. No more cold decorations. No more judgmental eyes watching my every move. I had started flying lessons, something I'd always dreamed about, but never pursued because Rachel thought it was reckless and a waste of money. Turns out, she was wrong about that too, just like she had been wrong about me in so many ways. Work was better than ever. I threw myself into projects, took on more responsibilities, and even started considering opening my own business. The stress of trying to keep up with someone who never appreciated me was gone, and in its place was ambition. Real ambition, the kind that didn't come from trying to prove something to a woman who never deserved me in the first place. One evening, I was sitting on my back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, beer in hand, when Jason showed up. He plopped down in the chair next to me, exhaling loudly. You're a whole different guy now. You know that? He said, cracking open his own drink. I smirked. Yeah. He nodded. Before, you were always stressed, always making excuses for her, always walking around like you were carrying a weight on your back. He took a sip, then glanced at me. Now, you look happy, man. I leaned back in my chair, letting his words settle in. He was right. I'm happy, I said simply. Jason smirked. Rachel must hate that. I chuckled, shaking my head. Not my problem. And it really wasn't. I hadn't thought about her in weeks. She had faded into the past, just another lesson learned. For what I had heard, her life hadn't improved much. She had burned too many bridges, made too many mistakes. And me? I was better than ever. As I sat there, taking in the quiet, the peace, the freedom, I realized something. Rachel had done me a favor. Losing her wasn't a loss. It was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And as I raised my beer to the sky, I smiled. Because my life wasn't just back on track, it was finally mine. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.